Hello, today for the Michigan Co-op webinar we have Corey Steiner, and Corey is the superintendent of Northern Cass School District in North Dakota, and as you can see from his screen, they are a district in the middle of a cornfield. And Corey is going to be talking today about creating a learner-centered district, and their district really focuses on the learner as individuals for their students, and I'm sure that Corey will talk to us about the community that they have there within their school district and the surrounding area. So welcome, Corey. We're glad to have you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Like I said, my name is Corey Steiner. I'm the superintendent of the Northern Cass School District. The Northern Cass School District is a district that was consolidated in '97 and is opened a new building in '99. We are 25 miles northwest of Fargo, for anybody who needs some context if you haven't had the privilege of being in North Dakota. And yes, it's absolutely true. We are in the middle of a cornfield. None of the towns back then wanted to lose a school, so a farmer donated the land and said, let's put the school in the middle of all the towns, and that's really what happened. We like to think of ourselves as a destination school. We're 630 learners. Out of those learners, about 200 open enroll into our district. We think that's a pretty positive thing, saying that they like what our product is. And we have a lot of pride in our district for some things that we've accomplished. I want to share just a little bit of that to give you a little background of who we are. We were the first rural school district in North Dakota to have a teacher leadership academy, which was a partnership with North Dakota State University, one of our research institutions, to provide an on-site master's program that actually was co-taught by our administration and a professor. And all of the work in that program is linked to the district. So there's no papers on theory of organization. You actually dig into what your organization is. And the reason I share that isn't because that's something so rare. It's because that's where this conversation about personalized learning came from. 4 days of very intense summer classes where we started having to talk about what it could look like if we blew up our system. And so that's very important in the scheme of those. For those out there, we're an avid school district. We've been that for 2 years. We've been one-to-one since 2006, the first one in the state of North Dakota. We have a student-run help desk. They do all the fixing of our network. They do all the fixing of devices. It's really kind of a shining star for us. We're part of the NIMSI group, which means we offer 7 advanced placement courses and 3 dual credit courses. For a school our size, there's nobody in the state that can equal that. We were one of the first rural school districts in North Dakota to offer mental health therapist services on site. We're a NOVO grant winner of $150,000 to increase the services we offer to eventually actually have services for our community members. And we are a high reliability school district, certified at level 1 and 2, and actually Friday is our day to certify at level 3. So that just gives you a little context of who we are and where we come from. So I'm just going to jump in and talk a little bit about our why statement. And I want people to understand, like, we don't use the term mission or vision. We use the why, and it comes from the work of Simon Sinek. He always says, you know, it's why you get out of bed in the morning and why someone should care that you get out of bed in the morning. And so we believe every child can change the world. Therefore, we must provide a world-class education. I know it's words on a page, but I will tell you, if you walked into our school, you would hear and you would see this in action. People believe it. There is not one meeting, and I am being 100% honest, not one meeting that we ever have that we don't start with this. That includes any parent meetings, it includes any of our staff meetings, and it includes any task force, it includes anything I present out to our statewide groups. Our why drives. And when we started to try to identify what does world-class education look like, over the course of 6 months and many meetings, we realized we couldn't do it. And we came to the conclusion that the reason we couldn't define world-class education is because we have a broken system. And with a broken system, you can't possibly get to a different paradigm in education. And I'm going to talk more about that later, but our why statement is who we are. It is what we're about. And again, I would feel comfortable you asking any person in this building about what that means to them. That's our driving force. That's our North Star. Our non-negotiable, so if in other terms you might say this is our mission, our goal is that every learner graduates choice ready. I do not have a care if a kid doesn't want to go to college and wants to go into career. And by career, I really do mean work, because when you're 18, I don't know if career necessarily makes sense. But if a child leaves our building and they have the skills necessary to go in and do the things an employer wants from them, I'm okay with that. If they want to go to college and they're ready for a 4-year and that's their choice and they have the skills, they want to go to a 2-year, that's their choice, they have the skills, I'm supportive of that. Or if they want to enter into the military, our goal is not to give kids knowledge to be successful in college. It's to give them to be skills to make the choice that will guide them through the rest of their life. And this is really our one big metric at our school. We certainly look at our standardized test scores, because just like you, we have to. But our big metric is, are our kids graduating choice ready? No more of the idea of you've been a failure if you go into a job after school or you're in the military, that the only success is if you're in college. We no longer think that way. We also have created a portrait of a graduate. So when I mentioned to you that we're talking about skills that learners have instead of knowledge, and I'm an old social studies teacher, and I was really bad at saying the knowledge was the most important part. But when we talk skills, these are what we've identified. And you can debate as long as you want on, are these the right terms? I think they can be combined, and we're having some conversations on that. But what I'd ask is, when you look at these ideas, if you had a learner leave your system and they had these skills, would they be choice ready? Would they be okay to survive outside of your walls, outside of maybe their parents' walls? And our answer, we think, is a resounding absolutely yes. The big thing we're doing now is we have a capstone project for our seniors where they actually have to tell their story and really engage in this idea of, tell us how you have these skills. Don't tell me how you hand your research paper in on time. Tell me how you develop the skills of organization in your everyday life. And that project is in year 2, and it's getting better and better. We also do gateways. So we do mini presentations at 8th grade, 5th grade, and 3rd grade, which are our transition years. So this is the other metric that we use to identify our learners choice ready. So again, I put that in there to be some perspective. So let me talk a little bit about why we decided to make a change. Our results were good. 94% of our kids went on to post-secondary. 97 to 98% of our kids graduate. That's just not an issue for us. But what we were finding is some of the things that when kids went into college, they weren't doing well, or into the world of work, didn't have skills. And what we came down to was the idea that every learner is a unique individual. Now, we all know that, but yet our system doesn't respect that. So I think of it this way, and I had an interesting conversation with one of our learners this year. We allowed them some choice in something in our school, something simple as the lunch lines. And they said, thank you. And I go, well, why are you thanking us? And he said, well, that's the first choice I've got to make in 13 years. And they were kind of being a little bit of a smart aleck, but they kind of weren't. And then we started to look at it, and then we said, think about it. We dictate the when, where, why, how, what for everything. Here's when you go to the bathroom. Here's what you do when you get done going to the bathroom and you walk out of the bathroom. Here's what side of the hall you walk in. Here's where you put your cell phone. And we never give kids the ability to make choices. And then we're amazed when they get out of our buildings and they can't make choices. And we started to look at that as we need to take some blame for that. And we have to start the idea of respecting that every learner is an individual, and every learner has to be respected for being an individual. Like I said, our learners get into college, but the biggest issue with that was they were never getting out on time. And if they got out on time, they weren't working in their major area. They weren't working in a passion area. And so we tried to dig in a little bit and say, why is that? And we said, well, because we require all these core courses, just like all of you do. We give kids no choice, so really they never get to explore a passion area. They never get a chance to find out who they want to be. And so the story I have is real simple. A young lady went out to job shadow for us, and she said, I'm going to be an architect. And we said, well, let's job shadow it. She goes, no, I don't need to, but I'll do it. I'll do it to humor you. But I've known since I was a third grader, I'm going to be an architect. So I know it. She goes out, she spends an 8-hour day with an architect, and she comes back in and she sits down and she's kind of got like this broken look on her face, and she's like, I don't want to be an architect. I couldn't believe it. They're working on the same project for 3 years. I thought I got to just design buildings. I thought I got to do, a lot of this fun stuff, but it's a lot of math. And we said, well, what else would you like to do? Well, you know what? My family life isn't great. I'd like to think about social work. So she went and visited and did that, and she came out. She goes, that's what I want to do. And so what we thought, the epiphany for us wasn't that kids should leave our building knowing what they want to do, but they need to have some idea about what they shouldn't want to do. And I want to say that again, because I have some people that freak out on me when I say that in our building. It's not about getting our learners to know what they want to do. It's about getting our learners to understand some things they don't want to do. If we could do that and get them into some authentic experiences, some internships, experience-ships is what we call them, kids will have more success when they walk out of our building. Now that links to the idea of, as we talked about this, a lot of the blame for the ills in education get blamed on 3 groups. It gets blamed on kids, these kids today. We always hear it. I'm a believer that this is the most gifted generation of learners our country has ever seen. And I think we have a lot of data, both quantitative and qualitative, to support that. We blame parents. If these parents would do a better job, even though a lot of us are those parents, and then we blame educators and say, if the teacher would only do this when they're teaching my kid, this wouldn't be an issue. And what I've come down to believe, and our district has come down to believe, is it's none of that. It is a broken system. It is a system that's based on 150 years of a tradition. It's a system that values conformity. It's a system that values the idea that every kid should get the same thing at the same time. It values a strict timeline. We start school on this date, we end school on this date, we give grades and cut grades off on these dates. It values everything that our world doesn't deem important anymore. And I'm going to say that one more time. It values the things that our world doesn't deem important anymore. And we, from that decision or discussion, when we said, the system's the problem, because we have the most gifted educators in this country working right now. And we said, if the system's the problem, then what do we do? And we said, well, if it's good for every learner to have a personalized experience, why wouldn't we do that for every learner? Why wouldn't we build a system based on respecting the individuality of those kids that walk through our doors every day? And right away that there was some kickback on that, saying, yeah, that's great, but you can't do it. And we said, well, what if we could? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the whole process we took on. And as we go through this, can you please remember that fine is a 4-letter word? And it's probably the F word that I think is the most dangerous word in education today. Fine is a way for us to avoid change, and it's a way for us to avoid doing what we absolutely know is right. So I just want you to remember, fine is the F word we should be avoiding in schools. If somebody, because you'll have parents come back and say, yeah, I don't know why you're changing it. It was fine for me. And I think about it, I have 2 daughters, a 14 and 16-year-old. And I always say, when they get married, I hope they marry somebody that's better than fine. I hope that they have a life that's better than fine. I don't want fine for my children. I don't think any of you out there listening want fine for your children. Our system shouldn't be fine. So we started over. And here's why we said to personalize. And I'm going to throw all these on the slides out there just so you can have those all. All right, so first of all, if when we walk into schools, if our end goal is learning, is there anything else that matters? And when I'm saying learning, I'm talking, yes, they have to be on time and learn that skill. They have to learn to be respectful. I'm talking learning as a whole. And I think about it this way. If I'm traveling in North Dakota, you drive everywhere, just like you do in your areas. But if I'm traveling to my hometown, which is about 6 hours away, I would venture to say there's an infinite amount of ways I can get there. If I'm going to Southwest North Dakota, I could certainly go through Beijing, China. I don't know if that's efficient, but I could do it. But if the ultimate goal is that there's no timeline for me to get there, and getting there is all that matters, then getting there is all that matters. If learning is the most important thing, we shouldn't put any links around learning. And I just want you to be really clear about that. If the end goal is learning, then the end goal is learning. It doesn't change. We mentioned the research, and you realize this, and you all know it. And if you don't know the research, look at your own kids if you have them. I have two daughters, as I mentioned, and they are such drastically different young ladies. It is so amazing. They are, one's outgoing, the other is very shy. One deals with, like, has a million friend groups. The other one struggles with some anxiety and mental health issues. And they're just two different people. Yet the system doesn't say they're different. My one daughter could have been done with Algebra 1 in about 10 weeks. The other one needed 38. And there's nothing wrong with that. But our system does not respect that. All the research out there tells us every kid's different. Shouldn't we have a system that respects that research? I mentioned it. Great educators, great learners, great parents. Yes, I know we have some that aren't great, but I think for the most part, we should be pretty happy. We have very good, especially here, we have got great parents. We've got great learners. We've got great educators. We have every condition in North Dakota and where we're at to do this work. You might not have that, so you have to figure out what conditions you can leverage and not focus on the ones you can't. You know, if you say, oh, our parents aren't involved and that's a problem and parents aren't holding kids accountable, well, unless you're going home every night with those kids and going to help parent, stop talking about it. Start worrying about what you can control. We knew we had some good things we could control. And then the last thing I'll say on this kind of why slide is, I believe this is a moral imperative. I believe we are absolutely acting in an unethical manner if we're not taking into account research and we're not looking at our systems and redesigning. I'm not talking about tinkering. Tinkering is a word that makes us feel good, but it doesn't accomplish or have any impact. I'm talking about transforming. And we do have a moral imperative to begin to transform our system. So at Northern Cass, we identified some key things that we wanted for personalized learning. So these are our personalized learning pieces that we wanted out of our system. So first of all was ownership. It includes voice and choice, not on everything. There's some things that as the educators, we still decide. It's a very active process, but wouldn't it be a great system where learners are the ones talking about what they need for their learning, identifying what they need next with the guidance of a truly gifted educator? How about learners advocating? I still have kids that will have parents call and say they don't know how to get help on a question in their math class. And did they ask the teacher? Oh no, they're too scared to do that. And you know, in your system where, you know, maybe you have a big system and there's 1,000 kids in high school and they don't know the educators, they know every educator in our building quite well because we are smaller. So how do we get kids to advocate? The other day, and we were only about, 3 to 4 months of deep work into this. And we had a conversation with a young lady the other day, and she said something that might have been the most profound statement I've heard. She said, before we started doing this work, I'd ask a question on everything I wasn't sure on because I just needed the answer. Now I know what questions to ask. I'm asking the right questions because that's best for my learning. That's what we want. Meet learners where they're at. So this is not saying we lower expectations, but it's also saying we don't just force expectations when a learner's not at that level. If a learner needs 40 weeks to do Algebra 1, shouldn't they get 40 weeks? I don't know where the 36 weeks of 5 days a week at 50 minutes for this amount of time came from. It doesn't make sense. And then if a learner only needs half the time to learn it, let's figure out a system where we can be respectful of that. I mentioned skills more than knowledge. I think everybody gets that. Connections built within in our staff. So this is the idea of the whole student. We tried to focus on this as an academic initiative, and we found very quickly it had to be an academic and social emotional learning initiative. If we didn't do that, it didn't work. So there is a huge part about the whole student that you must have in the conversation, and you need your counselors and you need mental health people at the table when you're doing this work, because you're going to have to figure out how to make this part of the everyday happenings in your district. And then the last one, authentic learning opportunities. We have two like BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. One is that every kid that chooses to would be able to graduate Northern Cass with 1 year of college paid for. And we're working on that. We've got some partnerships with Arizona State that we think that's going to be a reality. And the other is that every kid who would choose would be able to go into an internship for 150 hours during their high school career during the school day, get paid for that, and earn credit. We will start next year with our first 4 learners doing that. But those are our personalized learning, our non-negotiables. These are what everything we have done has been driven by at Northern Cass. So let me talk to you about how we went about the shift. And there's a ton of stuff on here, and I know that it's going to be overwhelming when you look at it. And that's where you may have to just reach out to me to ask me on specifics. I will share anything we have developed. None of that is proprietary. I want you to be able to have anything we need. I will talk to you about it. I will put you in touch with our educators. I will put you in touch with anybody that you need. So let's start off. What did we do? And I'm going to throw all these up there simply because I'm terrible at technology for the most part, to be honest with you. So first thing we did, the very first thing when we thought this might be something we want to do is we did an activity with our entire staff and said, why can we do this and why can't we? And from that, we identified all the things that were adult preference on our why can't we list, and we got rid of them. We agreed and committed as a group that it was an adult preference, like this will be harder. You know, I really like how I teach. I really like that I do the LEAF project in 4th grade, and I don't want to lose that. Anything that was adult preference had to go away. That was something we all agreed on. From there, after we agreed that really we could do it, and it's possible, we said, let's learn about it. So we used our late starts, professional learning days, we used summertime, and we did book studies where people got credit for it. We focused on a couple books, Inevitable and Beyond Reform. There's so many more out there now. Like if we would start today, I would be looking at a variety of different ones. We have about 8 or 10 other ones we've used. Marzano has a great one on how do you implement a new system. But what I would tell you is Inevitable was kind of that foundation setting book. There's a lot in there we do not agree with now, but it was great stuff. And we agree with the fact that they blew up a system. Beyond Reform is the Lindsay Unified School District in California. It is an amazing story. We've been on 2 visits down there. So you got to do some reading so you can start to develop some common framework of understanding. Site visits were important. We were lucky enough to get a grant from the Bush Foundation out of St. Paul, Minnesota for $150,000. We have sent groups down to Lindsay, California twice. I won't go into detail. Perhaps the most amazing story of transformation I have ever seen. There's no reason they should be doing what they're doing with the conditions they have, and they have completely flipped the script. Seriously, you got to go there if you ever have a chance. Whatever your PD money is, you find a way to go there and hear their story. RSU2 in Maine, we've been there 2 times. We had an opportunity to really see what it looks like system-wide. And then we've been to Harrisburg, South Dakota, which is in Sioux Falls, which is only about a 3.5-hour block from here. I have been able to go to multiple other places. Your site visits change from the beginning of, I just want to learn about this, I really want to hear about this, to now it is, how does this look in our system? You will never be able to go to a place and take everything they're doing and put it into your system. You will be able to take the things that they do and tinker it into yours. So when we started doing that, we came back, and the first thing we did is we fixed our curriculum. We identified our priority standards. We worked with a group called Technology and Innovation in Education out of Rapid City, South Dakota. We contracted 8 full days throughout the year and in the summer, where we identified pre-K through 12, all of our priority standards for every core and all of our electives. And then throughout this year, that was last year, we've been refining. We developed proficiency scales for every single one of those priority standards, because that's all we assess on. We don't give tests or grades on anything that's not a priority standard. We give formative assessments, but the only summative piece is on those standards. And we're working now on building the assessments to go with those, and that includes not only your traditional assessment, but also our performance-based assessments. And then this is linking to a standards-based initiative, and I'm going to talk more on the next slide about what we're doing with standards-based grading. Another huge piece of this, and I will tell you, this is one that I think I would have moved up and changed, and it's common language development. So you'll hear me slip back and forth, but some of the stuff we did is we have about 50 terms that we identified as absolutely critical in our district. And I will say we spent more time, and it was a beat your head on the wall moment, but we spent so much time on tinkering with what the words would look like and wordsmithing, and we thought it was kind of a waste, but I'll tell you, it's been the most productive thing we've done, because now we call kids, our students are learners, and you hear our learners say that. Our teachers are educators, and we say that because everybody in our building, every bus driver, every para, they have to introduce themselves as, I'm an educator who works in transportation. I'm an educator who works in our kitchen. Every person's an educator, because learners should be learning from them all the time. And our classrooms are learning centers. We had a lot of people who didn't like that terminology, but what we found is when we were breaking our old system, we needed to change the language, or we saw simple little shifts back simply from the words we use. So I will tell you, that was one of the most important, impactful work we did, and I would have never guessed that would have been the case. So those were some of the things that we did to get set. Another large thing, and again, like I said, it's a lot, and I know that. So we identified behaviors that support learning. We call them habits of work. These are things like, you need to be respectful. You need to persevere. You need to show grit. You need to show up on time. You need to hand your work in on time. So it's all those things that every one of us knows kids have to do. And people believe in a personalized system, like kids just go at their own pace. They do anything they want. There's no teacher interaction. And that's just so far false. The pace part is really the smallest, minute part of this. But what we found is, if we wanted to grade kids based on what they know, okay, based on their skills and what they know, instead of their behavior, we had to create another way to assess. And so we did. So we give a habits of work grade, and all of our grades that kids have now, and it's still on a B, C, F system. We don't have these anymore. We got rid of that. All of that A, B, C, F system does not include any behavior. So late work is not included in our grades. Work that's redone, we don't give partial, like, oh, you get 50% more, half the grade if you retake a test. Learning's the most important thing, so we're going to grade on when they learn. We no longer limit grades to the end of a quarter semester. So I have kids working on backfilling, we call it, backfilling content from the first semester on, and they don't make up a whole physical science semester. They make up just the things they missed, the priority standards they weren't proficient at. And so we've taken these habits of work and we've given permission to our educators to say, I'm not going to worry about any of the stuff I've always had to take into account for grading, and I'm only going to give a grade that is reflective of their learning. It has been a powerful, powerful thing that has changed our philosophy on that. We have a personalized learning team, about 15 people. We meet off site every month. I know subs are an issue everywhere in this country. For us, we just make it a priority. We find a way to get subs, we piece it together, and we go off site so nobody can be interrupted. We're closing down our computers, we're not taking phone calls, and we're working on the work that needs to be done. We've implemented a learning management system called Empower. Some people have Schoology, there's a million out there. I'm not a spokesman for Empower. It's what worked for us. Don't use Empower because you heard it on this webinar. Use it because it fits your system. It is the way for us to do standards-based grading, and it was a way for us to give learners access 24/7 to the content. And we are going to standards-based grading next year. Every run PK through 12, we will have no percentage grades, starting with our class of 2023. So our freshman class, and the only reason we didn't jump sooner is because some kids now in our freshman class going up have percentage grades, and we knew it would make the transcript too messy. So starting with our freshman class, there will be no more grades issued in terms of percentages or letter grades. It will be purely based on a 4, 3, 2, 1 scale. We're working with our higher ed universities to get letters of support. They've been very good about that. But we're going to create a transcript that reflects learning, not reflects endpoints, not reflects like the kid had a B at the end of May, but they had a B in Algebra 1, but they took Calc and got an A. I think that kid should be able to go back and change that B to an A in Algebra 1. They should be able to change that 3 to a 4 at any point. And so that's something that we're doing with standards-based. Really, we're the first one in our state to jump on at the secondary level. Site visits, I mentioned the shift in thinking. We ran community forums to share out what we were thinking before we even started this. We built a parent task force. They meet with me about every 6 weeks, and we do education. We do input from them. We run parent personalized learning days where parents are coming into our school for a 2-hour chunk of time. They're observing classrooms. They sit through a learner panel, an educator panel, and an administrator panel. That has been huge for us. They are the ones who have elevator speeches. When people kick back in the community, they are starting to correct it in the right way. Because what we found is if somebody doesn't know, they're going to make it up. But if somebody does know, give them the power, empower them to share your story. So we have this group of about 25 parents that are sharing our narrative out there. Next, we've developed look-fors. So when we evaluate educators next year, all we will evaluate on the look-fors we're focusing on. So you might say, one of the look-fors is I should see multiple stations in a classroom and kids engaging in a collaboration station, a coaching station. There's still seminars. That's our direct instruction. We'll still have seminars, but that'll be rare. We do coaching sessions with smaller groups instead. And I know some people will say, well, that's great, but you can't do it with elementary kids. We do it in preschool right now with our 4-year-olds. It's probably the most effective thing I've ever seen. I've sat with the 4-year-old the other day and I said, well, why are you at this station? And he looked at me and it's kind of his cute little voice. And he goes, because that's what's best for my learning. And, you know, and I'm not a very good actor, so I apologize for the poor voice. But I was like, well, what do you mean that's best for your learning? And the little guy said, well, I can read sentences already. So my learning, I'm at this point. And it's not them saying, well, this kid isn't where I'm at. And they go, that's what's best for my best friend's learning. And I'm happy for them. And sometimes I can even help him. 4-year-olds. Man, if we do that in a system, can we imagine what we would see with 17-year-olds? That is the most exciting part of this, is when you get kids in the system. That's why we refuse to do this at grade levels. We refuse to put it in and say, we'll do it with, you know, 1st and 2nd grade and just call it good. That's why we said system-wide. We knew the power would be so unbelievable. Next year, our elementary has always been a little bit ahead of the game. Next year, they're full force. And we're placing kids in cohorts. There's no more grade levels, so they're not a 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade level. They're a learning level. So next year, elementary is full in. Secondary is very strongly going towards the strategy part. We're there. And then I'm going to tell you this. Please don't ever get caught up in the conversation about pace. It's what everybody gets fixated on. Get caught up in the conversation about progress. If a kid's at a level of progress where they're ready to move on, let them move on. Or give them some wait time. So if they say you're 2 days ahead and you don't want them moving on, then say, let's do something where you can engage and look at a passion. And their passion, no offense to math teachers, is not doing more problems they've already been proficient on doing. Don't give them more work. Don't give them, oh, we'll just let you do 3rd grade work, but I'm not going to give you credit. You're just going to do 3rd grade work. If you're going to give them 3rd grade standards, then you better give them the ability to be proficient in those standards and not have to go back to the work again. So you got to be careful with this idea. For secondary kids, what we do when they get to that point, we tell them not to show up anymore. And I know people freak out about that, but we tell them, oh, you're done with Algebra 2 with 3 weeks left? You don't need to come to Algebra 2. They're proficient. And we have a waiver from our state. We don't have to recognize seat time in our district. So you have to think about the progress part. If a kid's behind, you're going to have to put some conditions in that they can't just get 8, 10, 12 weeks behind. And we're building in flex days in our schedule where kids will come in on those days, other kids won't, and they will work and get caught up. But there's all these little pieces that I'm not going to go into detail that you have to take into account. Don't worry about pace, worry about progress. Okay, a few other things, and then I'm gonna close up, and again, I'll have contact information so you can certainly visit or get a hold of me. So here's some myths, and this is some of the stuff that we had to really get rid of with our parents. So one of the misconceptions is screen time, that this is going to be all on a device. We put the requirement in, or the guidance, in a 60-minute lesson, a kid should never be on their device more than 10 minutes. Now, why did we say guidance? Because there are times when a kid might be working on a research project and could be on their device for 60 straight minutes. The one thing we know is there's no such thing as a typical day in a classroom. It just doesn't exist. The most untypical thing in the world are kids. And so this is not screen time. We had a ton of people. They were so freaked out. Like, my 1st grader is going to be with the 3rd grader. They can't do that. And I asked them, well, what about recess? Well, that's different. Yeah, recess is probably a much worse place to be socially mixed because of the size difference. I don't know that in terms of ability in academics, that really matters. So we made a promise to our parents that if anybody's going to go 2 grade levels above, we're going to meet with those parents and find out if they feel that's something that their child can do. And if not, then we go into passion projects, we go into wait time, we have a plan for that. But this idea of like, oh, I'm going to have a 3rd grader with a senior, that might happen once in about 150 years. And what I will tell you is when you start this work, everybody will come back to you with the 1% question. What do we do if this kid goes 100 miles an hour? What do we do if this kid gets way behind? Worry about the 1%ers when it happens. Worry about the 98%ers when you design your system. People believe that teachers aren't going to do anything. One of the people in a school district I visited and said, I thought teachers would just get to put their feet up on the desk and do nothing. And teachers work harder in this system. They have to plan so much more purposely, and they interact with kids on a smaller level. They're not going to sit there. You don't get a great relationship when you're purely interacting with all 20 at one time. You get the relationship when it's with 1 or 2, 3 kids at a time. And then there was this belief that this is great for enriched kids. I'm going to tell you this. If our current system doesn't work for struggling kids, do we really lose anything by changing our current system? Like people that say our struggling learners are going to really struggle, okay, but they already do, so maybe that shouldn't make a difference. So just this idea of like, don't give me this idea that it's going to hurt anyone. It's not. What it's going to do actually is make those gaps. It's not going to eliminate them, but at least it's not going to make them unmanageable, because that's the problem right now. And you know that. The gaps right now in a regular classroom, you can't manage them. We can change that by a new system. So the last thing I'm going to show, here's a why can't we. So as I went around and I talked to groups, and I'm not an expert on this, please don't do that. I'm just very passionate about this, and I've got a great group of people. I was able to talk to our board. We hired a director of personalized learning. So we have an elementary principal, high school principal, a dean of students, myself, and a director of personalized learning. Our board, they were the first ones we got on board with this. They are supportive and say this is the most important thing that we need to do. And so they hired a full-time person. They put in $75,000 in our budget to say, if we're going to do it right. Now, I know people will say, we don't have the money. We didn't either. We don't have the money to do that, but we're willing to spend $100,000 on a bus instantly. I think something that's going to impact the classroom is something that we absolutely want to make sure we do. Excuse me for 1 second. We got just an announcement going on. So here's the things you're going to hear. Change is hard. I would recommend the book Switch. It was a game changer. We hit a breaking point in this building in December of this year. And I honestly will tell you, this year has been the hardest year I've had. I never could put my finger on it, but it is because this change has been so heavy. And I mean, this is a heavy lift. You don't do this half speed. And when I read the book Switch, I started to realize about the emotional loss people felt. And it wasn't because they didn't want to do it. It was because they felt like all the stuff that they had done, we were saying it wasn't effective. And so we had to really sit down. We had these very serious conversations with individuals and said, like, tell us what your fear is. We took all those fears and we addressed them with professional learning. We addressed them with wellness activities. We addressed them with celebrations. Put that in, build that in, empathetic conversations every 6 weeks, because we nearly got to the point where we nearly ran. And when we were having the conversation with our staff, there were tears. There were people who said, I'm leaving. And we got there and one of them stood up and just said, we don't quit. We've never done that. So let's figure out what we have to do. Let's figure out a way to get ourselves back to where we can do what's best for kids. And the last 3 months have been the most remarkable 3 months of my career, not because of anything I've done other than listen. And then also remember this, just because something's hard doesn't mean it's wrong. And teachers have to stop saying change is hard. Okay, it's hard, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. So the other part, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Oh, I'm 25 years in this and I've done it my way. I can't do this. A system-wide change means every dog becomes old, except for maybe your new teacher. And let's be honest, our new people right now, they don't know what's coming when they get in the classroom. I mean, they're great, but they just don't know, and you don't know it till you get in there and live it. So what if the idea of every person in a system that's changing is an old dog? So, and on the other thing I'll tell you in this part is find your runners, let them go. Get out of their way. Give them everything they want to do this, and then get your educators in their classroom to observe. You cover the classroom, go sub. But like our runners in this building know they get anything they want. And you might say that's not equal. Nope, it's not equal. It's not fair. Nope, that's a different thing. It is fair. I will have educators come up to me and say, I'd like to do that. And I'll say, I'm sorry, that's not an option for you. When you're ready to run, that becomes an option. Our runners get what they want in this building. I don't make any secret of that. Does it make some people upset? It certainly does. It's not meant to, but I'm highlighting our runners. Some people will come to you and say, we tried this. And I get a lot of people that say in the late 70s and early 80s, we tried this. We did, not with the resources we have today. And I will also say this, we tried phones with rotary dials, with party lines. We tried phones that flipped, and none of us would go back to that. So don't give me this idea that we tried this before. What we're trying now with the resources is different. And then I'm going to reiterate the other day, why personalize? Because there's no typical day. There's never one day that looks the same in the classroom. So why wouldn't we personalize? If there's one thing we know we can't get ready for is the difference in every day. So why not build a system that respects there's a different day every day? So that's kind of where we're at Northern Cass wise. We've hosted tons of visitors this year. We have 3 sets this week. We're not telling you what we're doing is all right. We're telling you this is what worked for our system. We're supposed to be in year 2 of a 3-year implementation. We were told 5 to 7 years. Our staff said absolutely not, that's too long. So we're going to 3. We weren't supposed to start anything till the end of next year. Our staff, our educators were the ones that did it. Our learners pushed us and said we need to do it now. So we're actually, everything is really a year ahead of time. So we're really going with a bunch in, and we're going to figure out the other pieces as we go. So that's my story. That's the story from Northern Cass, a school district in the middle of a cornfield. And I hope that helps some of you out there. If you're thinking about doing this work, if you're doing this work, it is the right work. It is absolutely the most reinvigorating work I have ever done in my career. I come to school with such a different perspective now. I could never imagine being anywhere else than where we're at right now. It is hard, it hurts, it is emotionally draining, but again, it is the most uplifting work I have ever done, and I'm starting to see it in our learners, and that's why we're here. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Corey, wonderful. I mean, that story is just amazing. I like how you focus on the system changes, even though you didn't really have to, because a lot of districts that we talk to are, they're failing based on state criteria like test scores or graduation rates. And so that's why they're looking for an answer to fix that. But you already had that success according to the state, and you were looking really what was right for the kids. And so that's just amazing.
Yeah, I would say, that when we told our parents we were changing this, like, it was not well received. They say, you got to be kidding me. Our kids are going to college at this rate. And everything says we're doing great. And then when we really got them to understand about the skills part and how much better it could be, that was kind of the flip the switch moment for them. So yeah, you're right. It was a very different approach because we didn't need to change. There was nothing that forced us into this.
Mm-hmm. Great story. Thanks so much for sharing, and we'll share this out and have individuals contact you if they have more questions. And
absolutely, anytime.
Yeah, we'd love to say we'll come visit, but we'll see how far away that is for Michigan people.
Absolutely, and if you're going to come visit, we certainly don't do it December through about March. So
right. All right, great. Thanks so much, Corey. Yep.
Okay.
Bye.